Folks, I came across this video yesterday, and I have to give a shout out to Jay Miller, who had tweeted about it. But I decided to view this particular video, or actually Fox News segment for myself. And actually, it's two segments tied together. Tucker Carlson is an idiot, okay? There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This guy has had four shows on various networks, and all of them have failed. And now he's taking a page out of the Sean Hannity playbook in order to, I guess, try to survive within this show, particularly since their love child, Bill O'Reilly, is gone. And Sean Hannity, for whatever you might think about him, still has an audience within the Fox viewership. Now, I'm going to play this particular segment where a learned man, a professor, indicates something that everybody already knows. Black people are viewed differently by white people, and as an extension by pretty much all others, and our behavior is basically analyzed, criticized, etc., so that we as a people have to be on guard when we are around other people. The behavior of white people around white people or Hispanic people or black people basically are portrayed as, I guess you would say, the norm. But when black people are around, particularly white people, they're judged as far as behaviors in speaking. Are we too loud? Our actions, do we walk too fast, too slow? I mean, every feature of our behaviors is analyzed and criticized by white people for the most part. Now, I'm not saying all white people, because anytime you say all, you're automatically going to lose. But I will say a lot of white people will judge us just based on the color of our skin and then go from there. Now, most, if not all, black people are taught at an early age that you have to be cautious when you are around white people. That's just a fact of life, okay? And that's a fact that Mr. Carlson, when told, just doesn't want to accept. Unfortunately, that's too bad, because that is just the way it is. When you hear about the conversation that we have with our children, especially our male children, early on, we have that conversation with them in order to protect them, okay, from the outside world, from, I'll say it, majority white society, from the white mores, from white moral judgments. But for some reason, when, and you'll see the name of the professor here, I forget his name, but you'll see it momentarily. When he put that down in black and white in a New York Times op-ed, that thing trended like crazy on Twitter, and Mr. Carlson saw an opportunity to utilize the Sean Hannity playbook to call that racism. And you know something? Maybe it is. But it's racism not against someone, but racism in defense of our children, and letting them know that there is no grand kumbaya as far as this country is concerned, that they are targets they will come under attack. They do not need to let their guards down until it is proven that the person that they want to let their guard down with is actually a friend, an actual ally. But anyway, I digress. Let me play the two segments. And in particular, the thing that upsets me is after the first segment is done, another Fox coon, and I can't understand it. Fox has no problem finding a coon to defend their, I'll call it, minority opinion, their racist opinion, their antiquated opinion, their incorrect opinion as to how the world operates today. Anyway, here's the segment.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. We want to tell you about an op-ed that ran in the New York Times over the weekend you might not have seen. The writer is a law professor in New York called Echo Yonka, asked a simple question: can my children be friends with white people? He really asked it, and he wasn't optimistic. Quote, "I will teach my boys the lesson of generations old," he wrote. "I will teach them to be cautious. I will teach them suspicion. I will teach them distrust. I will teach my boys to have profound doubts that friendship with white people is possible." Those doubts mirrored the writer's own. As he put it, quote, "History has provided little reason for people of color to trust white people." That piece was one of the most popular on the New York Times website, even today. It was hardly unusual, though. Go to any liberal website, Salon, Slate, Vox, HuffPo, and you'll find similar pieces arguing that an entire racial group is untrustworthy and dangerous. This is a big change for the left. For most of the 20th century, liberals, and it was noble, argued that it was immoral to reward or punish people based on their skin color. Individuals ought to be judged solely by the choices they make. Anything less is bigotry. Liberals don't say that anymore. What happened?
I'll tell you what happened. What happened was we got our butts kicked so often by trusting in various groups. I'm talking about trusting white people, trusting Hispanics, trusting gay people. And every time they got from us what they wanted, and then we got thrown under the bus. Okay? So it's, in my mind, the same thing as distrust and verify before you trust. We practice that same ideology when dealing with the Russians, the Iranians, etc. So why can't we utilize that particular philosophy in our daily lives? Seems like if it's good enough for the country in dealing with other countries, it should be good enough for black people in dealing with people of other racial backgrounds.
Echo Yonka is the author of that New York Times piece. He's a professor at Shiva University's Benjamin Cardozo School of Law, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So what struck me about this piece, a couple of different things, but the first thing was the generalizations about a racial group based on their race. And I grew up, probably not so much older than you, in a world where overt expressions of that were not acceptable. You weren't allowed to generalize on the basis of race because the assumption was each person is an individual and you judge each person by the choices he or she makes. I don't understand when it became okay to generalize about racial groups.
Well, I mean, it's to me, a strange way to put the question. I mean, while it's the case that we all hope that we can be judged for who we are, I think while some people have the luxury to be raised only being told to look at individual people, it should be no surprise to you that black people, in particular black men, have been taught forever that they have to be careful how they behave around white people, that the way they behave will be interpreted differently, that when they misbehave it'll be punished differently, that if they laugh too loud, if they walk into a nice store. So with all due respect, Tucker, what was true for you has never been true for lots of people.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of ways to respond to that. One, on a factual basis, and in truth, in a lot of places in this country, the main threat that African Americans face is not from white people, as you perfectly well know. But beyond that, the idea that you could understand a person's motive merely by knowing his race dehumanizes that person. It's the definition of racism, and you're engaging in it. in the New York Times, and nobody says anything about it. And I just felt it was worth pointing that out and asking you if you feel it's okay to generalize about people you've never met, about whom you know nothing beyond what they look like, and say, I know who you are and what you believe.
So I first want to respond to the first comment. I think is ought not be let lie. While it's true that, of course, people of color face threats from other people of color, it's also true that white people face the overwhelming threat from white people. That is, people face threats from who they live beside. So I find
exactly.
I think it's fair to point out that we oughtn't be distasteful and say things like, well, the great threat. It does feed a certain uglier narrative that we don't want. But to your core point...
Wait, hold on. Why does the truth ever feed a, quote, ugly narrative? The truth is worth telling for its own sake because it's true.
You're welcome to tell the truth, but it is deeply suspicious that people are so quick to say things like the main threat facing African Americans is other African Americans, but you never hear anybody say the main threat facing white people is white people. Right, so there is no phrase white on white crime.
I don't know. I mean, people say that. I mean, I guess the point is...
See, that's bullshit. He just got caught. And that is a truism. Every time these people like Tucker Carlson are pushed back upon, the first words out of their mouth are black on black crime. But they never... and I do mean never. You never hear it. You won't, damn sure won't hear it on Fox. You'll never hear the term white on white crime. And that's a bigger problem for white people than the black on black crime problem is. Only specifically because there are a whole lot more white people.
You don't face a threat from an entire racial group. You face a threat from individuals who've made individual choices.
Well, we should turn to that. But just in closing, I should say we should be honest and not pretend that there is a phrase like white on white violence, right? That phrase doesn't exist for very particular reasons.
We can invent it here. But I guess the point I'm making is that you should never generalize about people on the basis of their skin color because it reduces them to the sum total of their skin color. And again, that's the definition of racism. And you're engaging in it in this piece. And I don't think it's helpful. I think it's wrong.
Well, so I just entirely deny that. What I said was that you should generalize and dislike people because of their skin color. What I do think is true is that in a world in which things have gotten ever more dangerous for people of color, it is in fact the case that that undermines our ability to trust each other across racial bounds. And here's what's true, or at least here's what I wrote. Not that white people aren't unavailable for friendship, but in this world, it is up to our white friends and allies to be sure to stand up for those who are under attack. If I want to prove that I'm the kind of person who can be your friend, that means that when something is actually threatening you, I actually have to be there for you.
Okay, but again, you're making generalizations across racial groups. So you say, for example, I will have to discuss with my boys whether they can truly be friends with white people. History has provided little reason for people of color to trust white people. I have profound doubts that friendship with white people is possible. Again,
that's
that's
absolutely right.
If I were to write, you know, I was mugged as a pizza delivery boy, and I told my children that they should never trust anyone who looks like the people who mugged me, that would be, I would never do that. I think that would be immoral. But it would be the definition of racism because I would be equating the people who mugged me with everyone else who looks like them.
I think if that's the only part of the article you read, it might sound like that. But of course, the article has a much richer argument. And the argument I make is, look, in a country where it turns out that when the most vulnerable people of color are under threat, those who they count on are nowhere to be seen, or at least for some group of people, and I speak explicitly about the political moment we're in today, right? So if we have a president who marshals forces of hatred and anger and divisiveness and frankly just danger, quite aside from who he is, I'm not particularly interested in who he is, if the people who call themselves your friends are not going to push back against that, then maybe you can tell me why it is I should trust those people?
Well, so I guess what you're saying is that people who don't agree with your politics can't be your friends, which I think is an unfortunate conclusion to reach, but it's different from the one you articulate here. You're making, again, for the third time, generalizations based on race, and the truth about the last election is, this is not a defense of Donald Trump, merely an acknowledgement of the fact that he received more African-American votes than any Republican since 2004. I think he had 8% of African American men. So that's not a huge number, but that's tens of thousands of people. Are they in the same category too? Can you not trust them? I mean, I don't really understand. If you're saying you can't trust Trump voters, fine.
Sure.
But white people? I mean, that's a grotesque generalization and a divisive one.
I'm a little worried that you keep reading the same parts without, I mean, you would make it seem as though the entire piece was just that paragraph. So the piece goes on to say...
It's the title of the piece, and it's in 14 separate graphs. Yeah.
So I have no problem standing behind the title of the piece, but it is worth pointing out, as I have again and again, what the piece says is, when those who count themselves as your friend see that others put you in danger,
right,
it is their opportunity to prove they're your friend. And if we have a let's just speak plainly about this. Tucker, you have children like I do, right?
I do.
And if your daughters were, I don't know, friendly with a group of people, and it just turned out that repeatedly, when they went out and your daughters were in danger, those group of young men just disappeared. I think at some point you'd tell your daughters, look, it's fine to be friendly with them, but these are not your friends. You can't
but I guess
count on
I would,
them.
because I'm not a racist, what I wouldn't say is anybody of a certain race falls into that category. I would never do that.
So
again, if one of my daughters was mugged by someone of a certain color, I would never say to my daughter, that's more evidence you can never trust anyone who looks like that, because I would be inculcating race hatred in my children, as you are.
So
unfortunately, when something like that happens, that's exactly what goes down with a lot of white people. If they or their children are attacked by a person of color, a black person, brown person, whatever, and they obviously survive the attack, there is an inherent distrust of the person or the racial group that attacked them. They tend to group all people within that group as in alliance with the person that they were attacked by. So what Tucker Carlson just said he wouldn't do is exactly what is done.
Well, I mean, obviously I deny that. Look, what I said over and over was, we live in a country where we oughtn't pretend that these divides have not consistently been on racial grounds. And we see that over and over and over. When black people are in danger...
That's true.
I agree. Yeah, when black people are in danger from, say, addiction, we get policing. When white people are in danger from addiction, they get rehabilitation. When black people don't have jobs, we get stories about why we're making the wrong choices. When white people don't have jobs, we get a presidential campaign about the forgotten class.
Well, you know, I mean, these are subjects I know a lot about, and I think those are gross generalizations, so I don't accept them. But
so I'm going to go ahead and I'll finish, and then I'm happy to hear your point of view. So if it's the case that we live in a country where these divides have always consistently been racial, then I think it's not only delusional, but it would be dangerous of me not to teach my boys that when they walk out in the world, there'll be a world that treats them differently. Should I
say the same thing to my children?
Yeah,
there are African-American law professors who dislike you because of your color, and you should dislike him back?
No.
And all African-American law professors? I would never say that, because that's grotesque. No, but again, it's race hatred.
So, I mean, you keep saying the same thing, and I keep trying to say...
Because I can't get past it.
Apparently. So what I've said over and over is, look, what matters when people are in danger, if you're going to say that you're the kind of person they can trust as a friend, is you have to step up. And when it's the case that these friendship lines break down on racial lines, then it's your turn to step up because of these racial lines. So if I know that in my school there's a tense point because everybody hates the Filipino student, when the Filipino student walks into my area, I'm going to make sure that he knows I'm an ally. I'm not going to disappear when he's in danger. And then placate myself by saying I'm his friend. I can't. I actually agree.
No, but I agree with you. It's when you implicate people you don't know simply because of how they look, then you cross the line. Let me just ask you, and I'll end on a question and let you answer it quickly, which is, how would you feel if I told my children in an op-ed in the New York Times what you told your children, but the colors were reversed?
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Will you teach your girls to be cautious around men until they prove that they are men that can be trusted?
men, but not men of a certain race, because I don't think that the races are as different as you think they are. You think one is good and one is evil. That's what you said in your piece.
I didn't at all say that in the piece, and if you could cite that, I'd be very happy to see it. But
you said you can't trust him.
I did say no. I did say that, and I think in the same way,
making headway, but I'm going to give you
include on that. Look, in the same way that you will teach your daughters to be careful around men until they prove that they can be gentlemen. If somebody said, "Oh my God, that's outrageous! Tucker Carlson is teaching his daughters that men are evil," that would be laughable.
You're teaching your daughters with race.
Forgive me.
Because, no, you forgive me, because we acknowledge differences between the sexes, but not significant ones between the races. Well, and so that's sophism, what you're doing.
I don't think it's sophism at all. I find it remarkable that you can live in the America we live in and pretend that we oughtn't see that racial lines are equally divisive.
That's not what I was saying. I said, would you be okay with me writing this piece to my children if the races were reversed?
Because the facts are different, Tucker.
Oh, okay.
Listen,
because one's good. All right, got it.
That's absurd. If I don't teach my boys how to be cautious, how to be careful, how to be perceived in the right way, I'm not just risking their feelings being hurt. I'm risking their bodies being broken.
Should I teach my kids that?
You don't teach your daughters to be cautious until they can be sure that the men around them are trustworthy?
That's not what the conversation is about. It's not about sex. It's about race. Right. No, I don't teach them that there are dramatic differences between the races.
No, it's not about sex. It's not about race. It's about danger to your children, okay? And danger presents itself in different ways. For girls, danger presents itself as men, such as that Judge Roy Moore down in Alabama, okay? For if you have them, daughters. For us, danger represents itself in the form of a police officer trained either in Los Angeles or elsewhere that is taught that the black people, especially black males, are dangerous and they're weapons. So Tucker is trying to twist this around, but it's basically an argument of teaching our children to be cautious, wary, and doubtful, okay, until proven otherwise. As I said, trust or distrust and verify.
So to be sure, it's fine for you to care for your daughters and make sure that they're healthy and well. But if I care for my sons in the same way...
So, ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. Thank you, Professor. I appreciate it. You're coming on and explaining that. Thank you.
Yeah, see, and that's bullshit, because that's exactly what it is. And the professor was right. It's fine for Tucker to teach his kids to be careful and cautious in situations, but when we state the same thing and in an even more obvious case, no, now it's sophism. That's bullshit. Now here comes the Fox coon, and that's what I'm going to call these black guys that appear on Fox and obviously don't have a clue.
Jeremy Hunt is an active U.S. Army officer. He's a leadership strategist for the Douglas Leadership Institute, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Hunt, thanks for coming on.
It's great to be on with you.
It's great to be on with you. It just seems to me, the reason I want to do that segment was I feel like there's a lot of, to be blunt, racial tension in America, and I want to make sure that everyone with a public voice is doing his or her best to make it better. And part of that means treating people as individuals rather than as caricatures, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, and of course everything I say on the air is just my personal views. I just find it incredible that here we have a law professor spewing out such divisive rhetoric, stoking fear. I mean, when I was young, my father taught me just the basic principle. He said, me, especially as a Christian, that I should love my neighbor regardless of their race, that I should strive to live in harmony with the people regardless of what they look like. I mean, these are basic principles that people learn in grade school.
This guy is lying. He is absolutely lying, okay? Because, let me back up. Maybe he's not lying, but I want to know exactly what world this guy and his father were living in, where his father didn't exercise the moral responsibility of teaching his son about the real world and how white people treat black people in the real world. So either he's lying or he and his entire family are living in fantasy land. But here we have one of these laughing, chuckling Negroes that basically are sucking up to the Fox News host and are presenting a position that has no basis in reality.
That at 24, I'm having to tell a law professor not to make these generalizations of entire groups of people.
It does seem like that is the line. I mean, you have to keep alive the possibility that just because people look alike doesn't mean they are alike. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I look like, I guess, there are a lot of terrible white people through history. I'd hate to take responsibility for their crimes. Do you know what I mean? I want to take responsibility for what I do and not what anyone else does. That seems fair to me.
Exactly, and the more we kind of engage and entertain these conversations about how entire groups of people are racist, the more we're actually playing into the hand of actual racists. I mean, if you're a white supremacist,
okay, now notice the argument. There's nothing in the professor's arguments that said the entire group of people were racist. What he said was that we have to discern from the group that we should not trust the group until that trust is earned, or until that particular person or people that you're dealing with show that they are not racist, okay? That they can be trusted. But again, they love twisting arguments around. And I will repeat it. The professor did not say that the entire group of people are racist, but you have to basically weed out the people that you can trust from those that you can't.
This country, you're guaranteed news coverage, you're guaranteed to talk about all these great things, and we play right into their hand. I mean, we are basically carrying out their goal of a divided United States when we see pieces like this come out in the New York Times. I mean, it is deeply disturbing.
When did we start believing in collective guilt? You're responsible for things done by people you've never met. When?
White people have always believed in collective guilt. It's called slavery and inferiority, okay, of the black race by white people. You have the white supremacists who are just out front with it, but you have the covert feelings by white people that they are superior. And that's how Donald Trump basically came to power. Make America great again. Take America back to the point where black people basically didn't have rights and were attacked here, there, and everywhere.
When did that become a concept? I thought the whole point of America was that we don't believe that.
Well, exactly, and basically if you look at after the civil rights movement, the new kind of protest politics, they took on this new line of basically everyone's going to feel this collective guilt, and we're going to trade you some type of moral authority in exchange for making you feel better about your guilt. I mean, it's ridiculous, it's divisive, and instead of viewing people based on the content of their character, we're still seeing this this kind of movement to try to basically make displays of social justice and make displays of, oh, we're helping the inner city community or whatever it might be, without actually looking to see if these policies are actually having a positive effect in our country.
Yeah,
brother, it's called systematic racism. Okay, it's called the inadequacies or the inequalities of the criminal justice system, of the educational system, of the employment system. Okay, and just because you got a nice, I don't know if it's cushy, but I'm assuming that it is, position in the U.S. Army, that doesn't mean that your particular experience is the equal of the majority of the experiences of the black community. So, again, you did state that you were speaking based on your own opinions, but I don't know what you're basing those opinions on. And for Fox, once again, they find a Fox coon to come on to basically muddy the waters and to put out an alternative reality position that, in my opinion, has no basis in reality. Let me finish up this clip.
It's creating wounds that will not heal for a long time, unfortunately. Mr. Trump, thank you very much.
That's exactly right.
Good to see you.
Yeah, okay. Fox Coon strikes again.